What's up, builders? Before we dive in to find out about how Nclose bootstrapped their way to become one of the fastest growing companies in Africa, I just came here to apologize for some of the technical gremlins that decided to join us in this week's recording. You'll see it in Rainier's sound in the beginning, but we sorted that out, and then for some reason our recording software decided to lose the sync of sound and visuals, so it's not quite in sync. So if you're watching on YouTube, maybe not the best experience, but you can just pop over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You won't notice a thing. So enjoy the show, and remember to hit that like and subscribe button. It definitely helps the channel grow, and we have some great guests lined up, so you don't want to miss out on that. So for now, enjoy the show, and thanks for tuning in. Welcome everyone to episode 23 of How Would You Build It? Stefan, Martin, who would like to tell us, what is Nclose? What do you do? What is your very quick elevator pitch?
Yeah, thanks, Rainier, and nice to meet you, Bobby. So, I mean, we started the business, 2006 conceptually. Essentially, what we do is we provide cybersecurity, or we solve cybersecurity challenges for enterprise and large enterprise companies in Southern Africa, a few in the Middle East, Europe, and the UK. I think our big differentiator is the fact that we've got a very strong engineering team. So 85% of our team are focused on making sure that stuff works, whether that's stuff that we've built or stuff that we've bought on behalf of clients. And that's of a team of 114 people, that's a fair amount of engineering capacity, and I think that's our big value, and probably what makes us a little bit different to the traditional security player out there in the market today. So yeah, that's probably our big quick elevator pitch.
I love it, and I must say, like in the startup space, a lot of people, they're always talking about, the idea, how do you ramp, how do you get funding? No one really talks about the cybersecurity element of their business, and it's sometimes a fail. I've been on a few projects where they did put it up front, but it's very rare that you do that. So how can you explain your growth that you've had, that exceptional growth, this list that Rainier is referring to? Did you guys know that you were on that list, or was it a surprise to you to know that you were one of these fastest growing companies?
Bobby, a chap reached out to me in December from a statistics business, saying that he was busy compiling statistics for Financial Times. And to be very honest, December for us is quite a busy time. A lot of our clients are trying to do stuff before year end. And I wouldn't quite say I blew him off, but I handed his details onto our finance manager, who basically helped him with all of his questions that he had. And then he got back to us in May, and he said, Stephen, just to let you know, you guys are in the article. And to be honest, if they probably would have spoken to us a month before, I would have paid more attention to it and given the guy a little bit more time of day. But I think, and I think the fact that all the detail came from our finance manager means that there's no candy coating. It's pretty much as it is. And there we are. So
I didn't even know that we had submitted anything. So in May, Stephen just sent me a message, and he was like, "Hey, we made the top, top companies in Africa in terms of growth." And I was like, "What? When did we submit this?"
Yeah. So I mean, Stephen, what I'm hearing you saying, if it was a month earlier, you could have been number one on that list.
I don't know about that, but if they had the sales guy responding, but no, it took us completely by surprise. And the funny thing is, nobody believes us, but that it took us by surprise. I thought it was orchestrated, but no, it was absolutely not orchestrated, which is quite cool. It's not, we've been doing this for such a long time, and we bootstrapped, we still bootstrap the business and run it in a particular way. And it's nice to get that kind of validation and recognition from somebody that you're not really paying, which is quite cool.
Yeah, because we do get those requests, almost on a weekly basis. Oh, you want to be on, this magazine? Oh, by the way, it's $4,000 or whatever the case might be. So I think we maybe thought it was one of those kind of approaches, but yeah, it wasn't.
That's awesome. We're not charging you any money to be on here, right?
Disclosure.
Yeah, just FYI.
But Martin, you work more on the operational side of the business. That's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, now the business is growing fast, and I mean, both of you were kind of surprised that you're on a list of the companies growing fastest in Africa. You on the operation side, did you feel this growth? Did you go, Stephen, slow down with the sales? Like, we can't move fast enough. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think as much as I'm a technical guy, I probably am less likely to say, Steven, slow down, because I know these, the sales cycles takes time. So, you say slow down now, and then we have a slow patch, and then we start complaining. So, we're always pushing hard for business. But yeah, the growth was definitely tough over the last couple of years when we saw a majority of the growth, specifically for operation, from an operational perspective, we've had to put a whole lot of process in place. I read stories about businesses scaling, that have VC funding, and they grow at, exorbitantly higher rates than we have. And I can't comprehend how they do that, just because the growth that we've had, which was been significant, is it's really tough to manage. But yeah, we've made it work. We've put some process to place. We're very particular about who we put into the kind of operational space, and yeah, that's paid off for us.
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest things that we, as a business from a cultural perspective, was that we were incredibly selective of our peers, and that was, this was way before this growth period. For up until sort of late 2019, we were 23 people. And then from beginning of 2019 to sort of now, we grew significantly, but we already had, from a cultural perspective and from a way that we ran the business and the way that we employed new members to join our team, we were incredibly selective and made sure that they, from a cultural perspective, they were good fits as opposed to everything else. And I think that, I spoke a lot to our broader team around managing culture through growth. And I know Martin spoke a lot, specifically in 2020, and obviously during the COVID years when, I think probably now 2/3 of our team, the interviews were done over Teams or Zoom, So to gauge culture in those particular scenarios is quite tricky and quite tough. But I think we're quite fortunate that we had those processes in place around, introducing new people to the team, making sure that they're the right culture fit and then teaching them everything else after that,
Yeah, Stephen, you speak about culture, and a lot of startup founders speak about culture, and there's books written about this, there's courses, there's seminars. But I mean, when the rubber hits the road, like, what is culture to you? Like, was this an intentional design? Was it just you and Martin, aligning on values and things, and then just having this agreement of hiring people along those lines, or was it intentional? Was it written out? Was the criteria written down, going, this is how we measure, this is how we hire, this is what we do?
Ranier, I think when we originally started the business, it was not intentional. It just happened to be the way that we did things and the way that Martin and myself engaged with each other. And, when people joined our team, how we engaged with them. A lot of the things we needed to teach ourselves in terms of how do we engage with people, how do we manage teams and manage people. And then we were actually challenged by a chap, a South African who's now based in the UK, a chap by the name of James Durant. He was asking, what makes your business different? And this is now probably 2009, somewhere between 2009 and 2011. And we said our biggest differentiator was our culture. And he's like, well, what is your culture? What is it actually? Tell me about your culture. And he actually back then challenged us to write it down. And we had, 7 different elements that we thought were, fundamentally, that we thought was fundamentally different about Nclose. And that talked about, hiring. It talked about engaging with clients. It talked about, how do we speak to people? It talked about sharing of information. It talked about a whole host of stuff. And I think that is, obviously, over time, our sort of that culture 7-point slideshow or guidelines has now turned into our values and the purpose of the business. So it has obviously shifted a little bit. But even today, when I talk to a client and I'm trying to tell them about the intrinsic way of how we do things, I still sometimes refer back to that old slideshow about our culture and how we do things. And so I think in the beginning, in the real early stages of Nclose, it was not intentional; it just happened to become. It just started off like that. But then somebody challenged us to say, okay, you talk about culture all the time, but I'm a person, I don't actually know what you're talking about, and tell me exactly what you mean. And look here, Martin, myself, shall I say, I am not a creative guy. I like to talk to people. I find it very difficult to put my words onto paper. Martin is a lot better in that regard, and that's probably why he runs it, the engineering team. But it was a challenging thing to put it on paper. But I think it was probably quite a critical step in the growth of Nclose and building out that good foundation. We're not a hard sell business. We don't bang down the doors. We're a relationship business, and I think sometimes I don't think venture funding would have ever worked for us, because I don't think we would have liked that pressure to make sure that we close the deal, and everything like that. I think we like the fact that we could build relationships over time, and then those relationships that we've built over time have built a really good foundation in terms of building the business in a sustainable manner. And I think what we saw was, the tipping point was just happened to be during COVID, and the start of the tipping point.
We didn't come up with it ourselves, from scratch. We did a bit of research. The HubSpot culture code, I think it's called, they've got a slide deck, and that fed a lot into it. And there's a lot of other companies that have similar kind of ways that they put down the culture. So that helped us a lot, and we just kind of refined it and tweaked it over the years. I think, but just getting back to me and Steven, I think that we're very fortunate that our values as people are very similar. And the way we've run this business as partners has been, it's very unique. I don't see that, we deal with a lot of businesses, and a lot of the times there's, it gets complicated. And to be honest, we've had very little, if I can even think of one occasion where, we've had situations where it did get like that. So I think that's really helped us, that we're aligned in the culture perspective, that, it makes it a lot easier to instill it in our employees. So from that perspective, I would say that we're quite fortunate, because, that those kind of things aren't easy to change in people.
So what's very interesting about everything that you guys have been saying is the fact that you've got a product, okay, that is cybersecurity, but you haven't touched on what you guys really do in the technology. You've been focusing on the people and the culture and the relationship that you guys have with each other as founders. And I find that quite fascinating. We haven't actually dived into the product itself. So would you contribute your growth to the culture that you guys have, enabled in your company, the founding partnership that the two of you have, or the partnership, or the actual product itself?
Sure. I mean, I certainly wouldn't contribute the growth only to our culture and our relationship that we have as a founding pair. I think our timing around, go to market with our platform, our MDR platform, was really good timing. So that absolutely, was a big contributing factor. But I think what has probably helped us in the growth that we've had now is because of the fact that we've built really good, strong relationships with clients over time, that when we've gone to them with tech that we've built, as opposed to, the big firewall vendor out there, they believe us that we, when we say we're going to do X, then we actually deliver X.
Amazing.
And I think, I have, if we go to any particular client, big C-level execs sitting at, the banking sector, and I take Martin there, I know that he's going to deliver it as it is, straight down the line, with no variation, no deviation, and I think that kind of trust relationship that clients are able to, place in Nclose as a business has helped us with that growth, because I think we got to the stage where, a lot of our clients needed to make significant changes in their security strategies driving into COVID, and we were the, obvious go-to. But I think certainly in terms of scale and being able to continue to deliver to client through that growth, that's where the culture plays a big part, because we always say, as a business, we can never quite get ahead of the curve in terms of hiring. It's really, really difficult, and that's because the skills shortage in South Africa from a cybersecurity perspective is just it's pretty mammoth. So our teams are because of the fact that they have this way of doing things, this ideas in terms of how they engage with clients, and that culture sort of embedded in their psyche, not because they've joined us, but because that's just who they are as individuals. that's probably helped us to be resilient through our growth. And we have our challenges, but I think that's definitely helped.
Yeah, one could argue that the relationships that we have with our customers is because of the culture that we have, and even I would go as far as a big part of our business is service delivery, and again, you can go back to our culture, and it's like culture happens without you knowing it, right? So it's difficult to attribute a lot of that to culture, but it definitely has a bigger factor than I think we often give it credit for.
I love that, Martin, and I think it's such a South African thing, and I've heard quite a few companies, they start with a service, and then in time they do like a product with that, and they go, instead of going software as a service, they go software and a service. So you kind of give a product and then you do a service on the side, which is I've come across a lot of different South African companies that have done that, and what I'm hearing you saying is the fact that you've established those relationships have really set you up to be able to then take a platform or product to them and say, look, you know us, you trust us, here's a product. Would you say that was fundamentally, or fundamental in the success of the platform? And do you think if someone were to start a platform from scratch in South Africa, in your space, without having those clients, would they even have any success, or how would one go about it?
It would be tricky. We are. Stephen always, when we go into meetings, he always says we're not the kind of bang down the door salespeople, and it's painful because you see other companies spring up and they have, massive marketing team, massive sales team, and they go down and they bang down the door and then they get in there, but it's not sustainable. It's not what we wanted to grow, and we've done it a different way, and one of the things was we said we'll always stick to security, right? So cybersecurity is our niche. We had so many opportunities to sell kind of Microsoft licenses, hardware, and we just steered away from it because it would kind of take us away from what we said we'd focus on. So yeah, it was the approach that we took, and certainly you can do it in another way, but we wanted to do it the sustainable way, and I think we're happy with the time we invested to build those relationships with customers, because absolutely we go have conversations that many vendors dream about having with their customers, that our customers trust us with.
And now they give you feedback, right? And you can incorporate that into your platform build, which then just makes your platform stronger and just cements its position so much more in the market.
Yeah, I mean, we've got. I mean, we probably need to have one or two of these sessions again. But we've had a few, what we call as customer advisory board sessions, where we invite our clients to come tell us about our, what they think about our platform in an open forum, and what do they want to see, and what do they want to change, and how do they think this will impact the way that they deliver cybersecurity to their executives. And I think to have that kind of robust conversation, that open conversation, you can only do that if you have a good relationship. And and it was quite easy for us to set up that platform. A lot of our clients were quite happy to give us that constructive criticism, and I think a lot of other vendors find it difficult to do that.
So on cybersecurity, it's one of those industries where there's a substantial amount of risk associated with what you do, right? And I mean, you're in the business of mitigating risks for companies. Now, there are other industries which are kind of similar in a way. If you think about starting a fintech and you take a lot of deposits, or you kind of start to build a neobank, there's also a lot of risk associated with that. And I think one of the biggest challenges for founders is like, how do you get your head around understanding that risk? Like, because I mean, you guys are putting platform out there, you're offering services to do things, but you're up against some crafty criminals, right? And you don't know what you don't know. Like how do you get the confidence and the how do you get going in the beginning? If in your mind, there's always this thing going, someone might be up to something which you might not be 100% prepared for.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I can only pin it down to experience, right? And we're in the risk game, really. We have to, especially nowadays. There's so many cybersecurity products on the market. You can't go buy all of them. You have to choose which ones you buy, and it has to be what we call a risk-based approach. And if you don't have experience in terms of or in understanding of the threat landscape, you could easily make the wrong decision and invest in something that you shouldn't, or that's not going to actually provide you with value in terms of protecting your business. So, us having that experience was paramount in, understanding that risk and making smart decisions like that. And that's really what a lot of our customers trust us with. They know that we know these things and that we've been in the game for a long time. So, it goes back to the previous point about having that trust relationship. But yeah, if you were to come into this without knowing anything about cybersecurity, that's a sketchy game that you're playing. You really have to know what's going on in the market to be able to make smart decisions.
Even Microsoft's getting compromised in the US government. Someone reading Biden's emails there that shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this concept of risk versus cost benefit ratios. We have a conversation with clients around those all the time. That cost benefit ratio is quite important in the cybersecurity space, because you can go buy every tool set under the sun, but it's still not going to cover every particular avenue where you could potentially be compromised. The analogy of, it's not a matter of when you're going to be compromised. It's not a matter of if you're going to be compromised. It's more a matter of when. So one of the things that we focus on is, when you are compromised, we just want to be able to pick it up really, really early, detect it really early, so we can mitigate the what they call as dwell times, the time that the person's actually in the network that you know about, and mitigate the damage. Reduce the amount of hurt. And I think that's quite important.
What advice would you say to a startup that's not thinking, going back to one of my previous points, a startup that's not thinking about their cybersecurity right now? What do you say to them?
Yeah, look, I think and we've done quite a bit of work in some of the sort of startup fintech space. Certainly, when you're developing your code, you need to make sure that code is, in the process that you go through in terms of developing, needs to include some kind of controls and testing. I can't stress that enough. And I think so many the startups, they follow this bootstrapping concept. Pretty much every startup out there does, but it doesn't mean that you can't negate the need for security. So use your better judgment and focus on it at the start, because to reintroduce security, 18 months down the line is very difficult. We often get called in by sort of smaller clients, and they say, no, we need to implement, we need to go do a penetration test. And we say, okay, have you ever done a vulnerability scan? And they're like, no. And we're like, well, before we come and, pull the ringer out of it, let's start with the low-hanging fruit. And I think it's start with security from the scratch, from the beginning, because I think it's going to reduce the overall cost in the long run. And it's going to embed that mindset, right up front. And it doesn't mean you have to do a lot of expensive stuff. Just use your better judgment. I think that's probably
So on that point, can you just give us some examples for a non-technical founder that's out there that, is just struggling to find a developer in the first place? Now you're telling them they have to worry about cybersecurity. What are those initial steps? You're talking about a vulnerability risk. I know the pen test is quite a common one, but what are those basic steps that a founder should look for, who's non-technical and doesn't know what they should be, don't know what they don't know? What should they know?
Yeah. So, like Steven said, we get approached by a lot of small startups that all of a sudden a bank comes to them and says, oh, what are you guys actually doing? And then they panicking. So, doing annual pen tests, and if you're writing software, that's really what you have to focus on. If your startup is writing software, which most of them would be, you got to look at introducing, like Steven said, security in the beginning. How you do that, your developer needs to be aware. Like this, the guys that are calling the shots there, in terms of the development life cycle, they need to be aware about security concerns that need to be. And if they're not, it doesn't mean that you have to get another one. You could get some consulting help. That's definitely something that you need to consider. And then once they're aware of it, then you can start working the penetration tests into it to test any software that you push out. And you can do it in a smart way. You don't have to spend exorbitant amounts of money to start the pen testing. Just start early. so that you don't have a bunch of stuff to test once you're far into the process, and do it regularly. Already, if you're approached by a bank or anyone about your software, they might be asking questions like that. And if you have some history that you're doing something, it at least shows that you are aware of it, because a lot of the times it's after the fact, and they try to get certs or whatever after after years of developing a piece of software.
Yeah, we see so many times these startups coming and saying and asking us, can we help them with implementing ISO 27001 certification. And I mean, to do that when you I mean, we did it as this we did it in 2000, and we were 27, 30 people. It's quite easy to do it then, but to do it when you're 100 people, it's not easy. So think about that stuff up front, and speak to people, speak to your peers in the industry. Certainly we're always open to have a conversation and steer people in the right direction. But there's so many businesses that are out there to help, and try and leverage them. And have a conversation. Doesn't mean somebody's going to charge you for it, but have a conversation and see if they can at least steer you in the right direction.
Yeah, you do need to get practical advice, right? So you're not going to go get KPMG to come audit your stuff. There's a lot of other companies out there that will, like Steven says, give you advice, and because as a startup, if you don't have VC funding or whatever the case might be, it might be difficult to say, oh, all of a sudden I need to do this pen test, and it cost me X amount of rand, which I haven't budgeted for. That gets difficult.
Exactly.
And that's in that security black hole can get quite hungry, and just if you don't control it, it can eat up a lot of your dollars, rands.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, firstly, you guys bootstrapped. So now going to being business owners, you guys bootstrapped, and a lot of the clients we're talking startups, but a lot of your clients are actually big retailers and big banks and stuff like that. So bootstrapping a business in Cape Town versus where all the big companies are up in Gauteng, how was that? Did you find it quite difficult? Were you on an airplane often to go knock on doors in Joburg, or how was that experience?
Bobby, it's quite funny. We've been trying for probably the last 3 years to change the perception that we're a Cape Town-based business, right? And still people say, Nclose is a Cape Town-based security business.
What's wrong with that?
But the reality is our team sits everywhere. We've got guys in Namibia, in France, in Secunda, in Durban, in Joburg, Cape Town, kind of all over. But there were certain periods where we did spend a lot of time in the airplane. Specifically when we were focusing on growing our Joburg market. But that being said, still, 65 to 70% of our income comes from Cape Town-based clients.
Really? So
we focused a lot of our effort here, and it's quite funny. If you speak to most tech businesses in South Africa, it's the other way around. So we, I think certainly for us, where to next. Joburg is, and other regions within South Africa and other regions in SADC, and the world is still our oyster, and that's where we'll be focusing a lot of our efforts. But I think the important thing, and something that's always in the back of our mind, is that when we focus our efforts elsewhere, we must make sure we don't degrade the service to existing clients. And I think that is so often these fast growing high funded businesses, they grow so quick that they forget who were the original pioneering clients who helped you get to where you are. And I think we still, certainly put a significant amount of effort into trying to maintain those relationships and keep them happy.
I think if me and Steven were living in Johannesburg, we probably would have grown this business in half the time that we did. Because, we wanted to live in Cape Town, and we did fly up. Joburg was tough. You speak about expanding into other regions, and most people talk about countries or, going into Europe or the UK. Like, just getting into Johannesburg was tough, That is something that we really only started getting right 2 years ago or 3 years ago. But we really got a solid team there now. And it was really about the team, having the right team. When we were bootstrapping, we maybe didn't hire the right people initially. But we really feel we have the right team there now, and they're doing a great job there. So that's I think key to that. Really.
So Martin, you mentioned something interesting. when you're bootstrapping, sometimes you hire the wrong people, and this is something that I've seen happen, right? So I was chatting to someone who works at a startup that raised a lot of funding in Cape Town, and I don't have to mention names, but they've got enough money to hire like any kind of competency they want. And he said one of the things that was really helpful and useful for them is the fact that they can hire really experienced people. When you bootstrap, obviously you're more, you're more budget sensitive because it's your own money you're spending. It's not some VC's money, and that could end up sometimes, hiring someone that's maybe not as qualified as what you would have liked at that stage of the business. Did you see this play out as well?
Yeah, like that was just how we grew the business. We didn't have a choice, really. And yeah, there was some painful times, but at the end, we grew some really amazing people. Some of them have moved on, and some of them are our customers now. And they're loyal customers, not because they worked here before, but because they know
how we do things.
They know how we do things, and they trust us. So yeah, and we still do a lot of that. We just took on 5 interns that are working in our response team. There's interns in other parts of the business, so we're a firm believer in that.
Raising people up.
We got to grow we got to raise the people up, and with the growth that we've had, we have the opportunity now to those long-standing employees that have been with us. We can give them, they can excel in their career and follow different career aspirations that they may have had.
And so what has been the hardest thing about this business, Stephen? Like, what are some of the toughest things you had to overcome, or actually are still battling?
Look, we've had a few sketchy years where it was, questionable whether we were in the right game, which is always quite tricky, because cash flows, it can really hurt, and when you're diving into your bond and you don't get paid for 6 months, and all your employees around you are getting paid and getting bonuses. That's always tough. We made a few silly mistakes, which impact cash flow, and those have always been quite tough. But I think we kind of, we've learned from those mistakes, and I think we were lucky that that they weren't detrimental to the business in the grand scheme of things. I think the other challenges that we have is, we are now in a position where we now need to introduce a second level of management and introduce a new operational management within the team, so that Martin, myself, and they can focus more on the strategic side of the business as opposed to remaining very, operationally focused. Although we really enjoy dealing with our clients from an operational standpoint, we need to start offloading some of the people management onto another, management layer. And I think that probably is going to be the next big challenge to address in the next sort of 12 to 18 months. I don't know, Martin, what other challenges have we had?
Yeah, look, the people retention thing is in cybersecurity. It's
a challenge. Yeah,
it's phenomenal challenge. That's still kind of all going. We're in a better position now, so we don't, we're able to pay more market-related salaries. But when the banks and a lot of these companies that have VC funding come, you got to really try hard to keep your employees engaged. So we've done a lot in the last couple of years. Doesn't make the problem go away, but we're certainly better at it now, and we're introducing phantom share schemes and all kinds of other incentives to keep the employees. And a lot of we've seen with COVID, not just in South Africa but globally, is people are more concerned about the work culture than the salary, so they're willing to sacrifice that. And we've made some hires where people have had to take salary cuts because they wanted to get into cybersecurity, and because we've built a bit of a reputation for the business, and that's kind of promising to see that. But there's a lot of young people out there, and when big salaries get thrown around, then it's difficult to keep them to stick around. But yeah, we're kind of getting accustomed to how to deal with that. So it's a little bit easier, but a few years back it was really tough.
Yeah, what it has done is it's made sure that our onboarding and offboarding procedures are quite nicely bedded down and defined, and really add significant value to the business that when we actually need to pull in those statistics and understand what's going on. So
Do you have any sort of program to bring in young blood? So obviously, there's a danger to it and there's a time constraint to having to upskill youngsters, but breeding new talent, do you guys focus on that, or do you kind of look for people that have already been around the block?
Yeah, no, we definitely bring in new talent. Like I mentioned, now we just brought in, we used to just bring in like an intern at a time. And now we've just done a batch. That's all stuff that we're doing internally. You kind of quickly realize that you can't just hire someone and they're going to solve some problems. That training part, you got to get them a laptop. All that stuff adds up very quickly. You got to get them a license for this. So the investment is quite big from our side, which it may not be evident to everyone, but if you take on 5 people, now you need someone just to train them. But that's how we've done it. That's how we've done. That's how we've run the business for the last 10 years. So it's just part of what we're doing,
and we've done it successfully.
Yeah.
The challenge is that you become known as the breeding ground, right?
So that's where everybody come head hunt the intermediate skill set from.
You just So I mean that's an interesting point, because you have to. In some cases, you can't just do an annual salary review for someone that's really excelling, right? You gotta pay attention to them, and you gotta have. And as the team gets bigger, it gets more difficult, because before, where I was able to see everyone on the ground and understand how they're performing, now I'm relying on my team to say, okay, we really got to take care of this guy. He's just blowing out the lights. So that's a tricky thing. The days of because we find that a lot of the younger employees, they take time to build a level of trust with you where they can have those discussions. I've had situations where on a Friday I have a conversation with an employee and everything's great, and then I get a resignation on the Monday. It's they're kind of cagey and it's tricky. So you got to rely on your team to maintain those relationships.
That's a great growth insight, Martin. I think and it becomes even more relevant the bigger you get, right? You need to trust the people and what they pick up and how they pass that on.
Yeah, specifically when you introduce additional hierarchical functions, right? It's really so important. And one of the things that we were discussing in our strategy session the other day is, as we implement this new organogram, is that we need to still make sure that there's that open door policy between Martin and myself and the guys that are just running the business. And how do we facilitate that openness, even though there are multiple layers between you and that particular individual? And that's more of a culture, and it's how you introduce them to the business, and what does the onboarding process look like? I'm always making coffee at the coffee machine, so speak to this new guy. Can I make you a cup of coffee? And it's that type of thing really does diffuse that situation. But like Martin says, even though you try to put all that effort in, you're still going to have scenarios where you have the meeting with the guy on the Friday, and he says no, everything's happy, he's got no concerns, and you pat each other on the back as you walk out the room, and then he resigns on a Monday, or she resigns on a Monday. You still have that.
Yeah.
And I think there'll always be, those isolated scenarios, and then you start questioning, are you doing it right? And but you've got to kind of be confident in what we're doing, and that we're taking the right path, without being naive to the fact that everything that we do is right. I think that's also a big challenge. Certainly as founders, you often think that what you have is the best, and you have to think about the fact that what you have is the best, but you also mustn't be naive to what potentially is out there that you're competing against, and be aware of your competition, but certainly don't focus on them.
So as we witness Amazon building their nice, lovely headquarters there on the M5, they knock on your door and they say, we want to buy you guys out. And you guys say, great, let's get this exit. This is a great opportunity. And you guys now say, cool, we want to start something new. What would you guys do? Where would you start? And lessons from what you've had from Nclose.
I think I'll go walk dogs or something like that. So go fishing, or I don't know. Yeah, my wife asks me that question all the time. She says, what's next after Nclose? And I'm like, well, I find it difficult to see past the end of my nose, let alone the end of Nclose. So we're still having a lot of fun, building this business and engaging with the clients. I don't know what it would be after Nclose. I think it's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, for me, security is in my blood. So and risk. But I must say, I'd really enjoy helping other businesses grow because we've learned a lot of lessons here. And sometimes we see what other businesses are doing and we kind of take for granted what we've learned. So it would be great to help other businesses.
That's awesome.
So that's maybe something that I would get
So,
involved with.
so if you don't know what it would be, like let's not talk about the idea of what industry or what, but where would you start? Like, what would be the first thing you do if you were to build a new business?
Probably from my study at home. I wouldn't get an office space. I think that's try and keep costs down. I think bootstrapping is probably in my blood now, and so I definitely wouldn't go out and get funding. I'd really be Martin or myself would probably go into business again, to be honest, because I know what he is like a partner. Because I think partnering with the right individual is the most important aspect, because if you don't have the right partnership, it's like a marriage, and you don't want to lead to divorce. That's for sure. It can just absolutely obliterate a business and obliterate a business's culture and the way that it does things. So I think that's look for the right partner, and the reality is if you have the right partner and the right work ethic, you can apply your mind to an idea. Then I think eventually you'll be successful, provided you remain consistent. Any business, if you're consistent, you'll eventually, unless it's a really, really crap idea, if you're consistent, then eventually it'll pan out. But consistency sometimes takes time. For Nclose, it was, probably 8 to 10 years of being consistent and continuing to, banging our head against the wall is probably it's a very bad framing of the term, but we consistently did things and didn't see any massive growth. Only after year 11, 12, 13 did we see the significant changes in the way that we do things and the significant changes in terms of the growth of the business. So consistency is key, and having the right partner.
Yeah, I think bootstrapping is really more, again, I think we really got lucky there in terms of me and Stephen thinking alike. We've spoken to a bunch of people and they're like, how did you do this without any funding? And it's just, we just think like that, we just always thinking of how we can do things smartly and cost effectively. And I guess that comes across in terms of how we get it to get services to our customers and get products to our customers. We apply the same methodology. So I think that's really helped. And I just don't know. I hear about some of the funding that some of these companies get, and I just don't know how. I don't know how they can spend that much money and not be successful.
Well, the problem is whoever gave them that money wants 10 times that back, right? So you have to grow the business to be able to do that, and I think that's often underestimated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think helping businesses with those kind of bootstrap, with that bootstrap thinking is probably a niche thing that we need to see more of in South Africa.
I think bootstrapping is underrated.
I agree.
It's absolutely underrated. If you look at Cape Town has got a very robust entrepreneurial, spirit, but all these guys want funding. And
I see companies that are like 5 or 7 employees, and they're looking for funding, and I'm like, come on, guys.
Funding for what?
You should be looking for customers.
Funding for what? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But isn't the whole scene to blame? They've romanticized the whole idea of getting funding. I mean, we watch all these Americans get like billions, and they think, oh, that's the way to go. Do you think that that's the problem? Is like this picture that they've painted for us?
Yeah, but Rainier made a good point there. You got to pay back 10 times the funding that you get. So that's a good way to look at it. And you can't, you're giving away. One of the things we did, we were in a Capacity. It was a Cape Town. You guys may be aware of it. Velocity. We were in their program in the early days, like 2010. And one of the earlier things that we that I particularly remember from the program that we were in was that the equity that you give away now is gold, and we've kind of paid attention to that and took cognizance of that.
Yeah.
But it's not always the case, right? Like there's a lot of success cases where people have given away equity and they've got funding. So I think you can't.
I think one of the key things, obviously, is you guys, being in the coal face, being close to the problems, being close to seeing how all of this unfolds. I mean, if there was an investor involved, and respect to all the investors out there, and there's lots of them doing great work and know what's going on in the companies they've managed. But you always run this risk of this investor coming in blindly, and putting in pressure. And even if they don't have the deciding vote, they can put on a lot of pressure on you to make a different decision and go in a different direction, which obviously as Bootstrap founders, that's not something that you had to deal with.
I think another important point, René, just talking about that particular element and pressure. Pressure doesn't necessarily, there's good pressure and there's bad pressure. And I think one of the reasons why Martin and myself have been good partners is because we hold ourselves accountable for each other's work. And that's good pressure. So I'm always constantly trying to do better work because of the fact that I feel accountable to Martin, and I sometimes hope that he feels the same way about me. But but that is good pressure because it makes sure that you're always trying to drive and do things differently and improve the way that you do things. And and we can have an honest conversation where you can say, Stephen, you're being a chop. What you've just done now is actually pretty crap. I think you need to have another stab at it. That's good pressure. When you have VC pressure where they consistently driving a particular agenda, and often their agenda is the bottom right hand corner. That's very different pressure because it impacts a lot of the decision making that you make, impacts the hires that you make, impacts the spending that you do, and sometimes we've seen it in certain areas within our business where we were consistently worried about the profitability within a particular element. And then the guy that was leading that business was, he made really, he could have made, I'm not going to say he made shit decisions, but he could have made slightly different decisions around hiring and hiring ahead of the curve and hiring the right kind of candidate as opposed to the candidate that was going to cost him less money. And so you need to be very careful about that. And I think a VC often can introduce those pressures, which is really not... doesn't help with the actual the bigger growth. But that being said, not all venture capitalist businesses are like that. A lot of them are in it for the the long run and the long haul, and they add intrinsic value, and they help grow with you as opposed to pointing the finger and tell you how to grow.
Yeah, I must say from my experience working in a company that got funding, it immediately changed the culture because now there was this expectation. The company changed almost overnight. You could feel it. It was in the bones of the people that walked in the corridors, and I think that's been my biggest takeaway talking to you guys today is it's not, like I said earlier on, your product is great, but it's actually the people and the relationships that help build your company. And that's been my biggest takeaway from today's conversation. René, any last big takeaways that you've had or last questions for the guys?
No, I love hearing a good bootstrap story, and I agree. It's underrated, Stephen. We need more bootstrap stories in South Africa. Thanks so much for sharing, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
cool. Thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks, René and Bobby. It was great to join you guys on the blog, the stream.
Okay.